New Year's resolutions and tax refunds. What do those two have in common? Not sure what this picture is showing, but I'm going to tell you that they have something in common, and they make family law attorneys very busy, which is why we are joined by Afi Johnson-Paris. She is with Fox Rothschild. She is a North Carolina board certified specialist in family law. So why do New Year's resolutions and tax refunds make it a busy season?
Well, a lot of people will try to stay together during the holidays for the sake of the family, but one of their first objectives once the new year hits is to decide that they want to move on and do something different. And a lot of times waiting for that big tax refund gives them the money to do it and start with talking to a family lawyer.
I see. Okay, so for folks who are looking at separation or divorce, North Carolina requires a very long cooling off period. So let's talk about that in the process of legal separation.
Well, in order to ultimately get a divorce, you have to be legally separated for a year. And it's much simpler than people think. You just have to live separate and apart without the intent to get back together during that time. So it's not good enough for one person to be upstairs and the other downstairs. You actually have to have two separate residences. But once you have that 1 year period, then you're eligible to file for divorce.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would say, but we don't have the money for one of us to move out and whatever else. And that's just kind of like, well, this is what the law requires.
Right. That makes it really hard for people. But they require that cooling off period if you want to talk about that. But you could also use that as an opportunity to do counseling or get back together and really decide that that's what you want to do.
Okay. So what happens, we hear this all the time, if one spouse says, I want a divorce, the other spouse says, I don't want to do that, and I'm not going to give it to you?
Well, it doesn't work like that. That's very made for TV. North Carolina has no fault divorces. And so once you meet that requirement of living separate and apart, then that party can file for divorce, whether or not the other person consents to it or wants it or not. You just have to meet that requirement of living apart for a year and living here 6 months before you file.
Okay, so, but what happens if that person says, well, I'm not gonna give it to you? Does that make any difference?
No, you just have to have them served. You can do that with the sheriff, you can do that with certified mail, and once they've been put on notice that you've requested the divorce, then the only thing they really are able to contest is whether or not that 1 year separation period has taken place. If it has, then the divorce will likely be granted.
Okay. So what happens if there are kids involved and you're trying to decide, custody and that kind of thing? Should you do that before separation?
I think it's a great idea to do it before separation. People need to understand that they will ultimately be co-parenting and working things out together for the rest of those children's lives a lot of times. And so if you can make plans for how you're going to parent your children before you even separate, that just puts them in a position of having more stability. You don't have to do it that way, but that's ideal so that there's not a tug of war between the parents as to who will have the children when.
Can you have one lawyer be for both parties?
No, unfortunately you can't. Parties' interests conflict. Even though it might be amicable and they agree on what they want, their interests are going to be different. So one lawyer can only have allegiance to one client and separate that one person's interest. Now that one lawyer can draft the documents for both people, but they can't advise and represent both people.
Okay. And so if kids are involved, and let's say the kids are obviously under the age of 18, right? Do you ask the kid who they want to live with and spend time with if the other person has like some custody times and not others?
Yeah, people often want to do that, but it's not a good idea to give kids the impression that they get to make those decisions. If things go to court, children have a voice, but they don't have a vote. And so they don't get to decide where they live, just like there are many other decisions that you don't give children the opportunity to make. And so it would be the same thing with custody. Even when judges do talk to children, which is often very rare, when they do talk to children, they usually don't ask, who do you want to live with? They just want information about what the living situation is like. So, parents need to decide where their children live, not the children.
Okay. If you're looking at separating or divorcing, you both have like the same bank account. So what happens in that year?
So a lot of times people do take that year to resolve the marital estate, to divide their property and things like that. So, our law provides that things are divided equally unless for some reason equal isn't equitable or fair. And so that's a time when you can use either a separation agreement or a lawsuit to divide all of those things. If you can do it by agreement, that certainly is less expensive and easier.
But one person could run up a bill throughout that entire year, even if the other person doesn't want them to spend that kind of money.
No, if you're separated, the types of debts that you take on after that time would be your own. And so once you separate, you're not able to accumulate debts for the marriage. But the things that existed on the date of separation, those do get divided.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Well, thank you so much for your
Sure.
expertise and your time. If maybe you want to watch this information again, maybe you need to send it to someone. This is going to be posted in the Two Wants to Know section of our website. Let's take a break right now and just find out what's going on with that weather impact.